Hi everyone, and welcome to another video. I am an absolute mess, but I just finished reading Sanctuary of the Shadow by Aurora Asher. I cannot pronounce that name. Hopefully it's not reversed for you guys, but I just finished reading this and I wanted to do a review on it while it's fresh in my head and I'm comfortable. I didn't want to get up, so we're going to do a review here on the couch. So, I think, let's see, today is Wednesday. February, let me look at the date. Not February, it's Wednesday, March 6th for me because it's in the AM. And my husband just bought this for me over the weekend on Saturday when we went grocery shopping. And I started reading it when I finished reading the last book that I read, which was The Winter Prince. I finished it and then did my review on it. And then I started reading this one, so it's only been a couple days. I'll put the dates here on the screen. So I think it's been like no longer than 4 days reading this book. So immediately when I read the interior cover, well, first of all, the cover struck me. And the fact that it has yellow pages with symbols on it, I was like, what is this about? So I read, the back of the book had a sample from the book, and it seemed like a girl had just portrayed a guy and he seemed kind of like tortured male backstory. Like, you guys know me, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So they got me interested, and so I read the interior and immediately it jumped out to me as a book with the kind of style that I love, like with a mysterious guy with a tragic backstory, and I'm a sucker for that. So and it honestly was very much that. Like, if I was only rating this based on my personal enjoyment and how it fits the vibe of what I genuinely enjoy the most and what I love reading the most, which is a male character with a very tragic, tortured backstory and history and tortured life, then this would be 10 stars. Like, screw 5 stars. This would be 10 stars. Like, this is exactly what I love. The male character, Wraith, is perfect, like absolutely perfect. And honestly, there's a lot of elements in this book genuinely that remind me of Hunter and what I did with Jared in Hunter. And I'm not kidding, there's one chapter that has a line that literally felt like, oh my gosh, this last line, the meaning behind it and what it represents for both Wraith and the story and his character arc was the exact same thing I did in Hunter at a point in this. And I'm just like, I'll talk about that later. For those of you who may be curious what I'm specifically talking about that don't care about spoilers, I'll talk about that later. But back to the point, if I was only rating it on that stuff, then this would be like a 10-star book. This is absolutely perfect. However, I am not just rating it based off that, and I can't ignore the other issues. So first of all, the writing style, while it was very detailed and creative, the world building in this is so fun, and it has a lot of new concepts that I never really thought about before. One being the circus, two being the, not really new, because the four queens being at war, not anything new, but the spin on it is that like one queen wronged another queen, and so that queen murdered all of the other queen's people. And the races, they're called elementals, but they have more animal hybrid traits. And then the main character, Harrow, is a seer. And so it's just all this really intricate, like, race building and, like, the interactions between the races and stuff. So that was really, really cool. The writing style, while being descriptive and stuff, was definitely not tight. And I found a lot of, like, fragments, which some authors are like, that's okay, you're doing it for the writing style, but it's not. Like, there were a lot of fragments, a lot of instances that were passive writing and not active, and a lot of other instances where the writing could have been much tighter. And so that was not distracting throughout most of the book. There were a few places where I was like, it took me out of the book. And so for me, a lot of times when I'm measuring that, if the person's writing style, even if I see some mistakes, if it's not enough to take me out of the story, like I just kind of note it and I'm able to move on and stay into it, then it's fine, and I don't really knock too many points. But when there's more instance, so the more it takes me out of the story. If it takes me out of the story and I have to get back into it, then that's when it becomes more of an issue, if that makes sense. So the writing style needed more editing work, which I think this may be like an actual published famous person. I don't know. I found it at Walmart, and it seems like it gives me that vibe. So, but published people can get away with this. I've noticed when reading Sarah J. Maas's books, she writes very passively. So they can get away with it and we can't. I don't know why. I may do a YouTube video about that later. But anyways, my biggest issue for this is the spice. There's like a sequence, not just one scene, but there's a sequence where the two main characters are staying in a tavern, and there's a lot of spicy moments in that. And at the ending, there was a lot of spicy moments as well. And then my biggest issue with this was actually the ending. I mean, if you take the spice out of it, the storyline and Wraith's character, the plot and his character arc, oh my gosh, absolute perfection. I love, love, love it. And like I said, my book Hunter is very similar in that aspect. And it makes me want to write another book similar to it with the same kind of vibe, because it's just so much fun and so epic. And just, there were so many lines as I read this book that literally, you know, when you get the feels and it feels like it's either punching you or like twisting your stomach, and you're just like, oh, that hurts so bad. But you get addicted to it, and that's like, you love reading books that make you feel that way. That happened a lot in this book, and I haven't felt that way as intensely in a long time. And so I really loved those moments. However, when you get to the ending, and I'm not spoiling anything, so don't worry about it, I'm gonna be vague, but the ending was not wrapped up in a realistic way for me. And a lot of it had to do with, again, I'm not spoiling anything, so don't worry about that, but Wraith's character arc should have had a more realistic, conclusion, basically. And instead it was kind of like a few pages of dialogue, and it didn't seem realistic to me. And then it was back to the spice. And for me, I feel like because I actually, coincidentally, when I wrote Hunter, I did something pretty much the same, just different races, different world, different magic. Like the main beats of this arc are kind of similar. And I did something similar with Jared, my character in Hunter. And there's a lot of things that when you do a story like that, you have to bring it to a conclusion in a realistic way. And that includes a lot of like work. The characters have to work for it. They have to work for their arc, basically, if that makes any sense. And especially when it comes to redemption stories, you have to work for your redemption. And I feel like it felt way too easy, honestly, and I was very disappointed that we kind of just had a few pages of dialogue, we breezed over it, we never even went back to Wraith's perspective. Like throughout the book, it's been pretty even between Wraith and Harrow, and especially Wraith, because he had the bigger character arc in this book, similar to Hunter, Jared having the bigger character arc, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Harrow did have hers as well, which worked for Harrow's character. But there was a lot that happened with Wraith toward the end of the book. The reason why it was so epic when it got to this point tonight where I couldn't put it down, like I had a lot of the book left to go, and I just breezed through the rest of it tonight because it hit that point. There was a lot going on in that arc, and I loved it, and it was so epic and dramatic. I could not stop reading. But part of what happened with him means that, we got to a certain point where we stopped going to his perspective due to spoilers. And so it's like Harrow, which is fine. Things get resolved and you get to the end of the book, and we never go back to his perspective. It's all from Harrow. Like, we do like a few times, but we don't go to his perspective for the big thing that needs answers, that needs dialogue, that needs resolved, the redemption, the resolution, the tying up loose ends part. It was Harrow's perspective. It was one conversation, a little bit of dialogue on a few pages, and then right back to the spice, and we just kind of breezed over it. And honestly, the arc ending did not feel resolved or earned, and I didn't like it. And so between that and the writing issues and the spice, just again, it irritates me so much when spice is used for spice's sake, as opposed to giving the characters a genuine emotional connection to each other. And let me tell you, when I first started reading this, the characters had a lot of potential. Like, they start off, the book starts off so strong, where the only thing between them is the emotional connection and the moments that they have together. And I genuinely thought, okay, this is going to be another really good book with an emotional connection that's genuine between both characters, kind of like The Winter Prince, which, keep in mind, I finished The Winter Prince and I started this book in the same night. And so, first of all, that's why it was hard for me to get into it first. And I think it was because I loved The Winter Prince so much. It's like when you love a book and you're kind of riding this high, coming off of a really, really good book that you loved, no book is going to feel like it lives up to that, and you have to have a couple of days to get your head out of that story world and to get into your new book. And so eventually that did happen, and I did get into this book, but it just took me a while. But they had such a strong beginning. Like, it started so strong where they had this emotional connection, and then all of a sudden stuff happens and it just shifts and completely focuses on the spice connection between them, and that's it. There's no, like, there's a magical connection, if you will, but the rest of it is just spice. And at one point in the book, one character tells, I think, Harrow, to heal everything, you were doing the right thing to heal things. And she meant, like, you were doing, like, something about what you did during those 5 days is how you heal the situation, or something to that effect. Basically meaning that those 5 days of spice that you spent together is the way to heal the situation. And that is such a cop-out, and it's not realistic, and it makes no sense. And it just brushed over everything that happened, and I felt like it cheapened the whole arc and all of this intense, I mean, this almost borderline dark fantasy romance based on what he goes through. And I will say there is a like torture in this book, like not extreme torture, and it's not like bad, but there is a level of that, and it's just a lot of deep stuff, and it just felt very cheap and just not, it wasn't resolved. Like, the plot was resolved in a happy way, and I did feel like the magic, the storyline, the plot line, like all of that had a proper conclusion, if you will. It was the personal character arc with Wraith and how that connects to Harrow, that was not resolved in a satisfactory way. So with that in mind, I have to give this, I'm torn. I would actually give this 3 stars because of that. Like, that's how disappointing this was. However, I loved Wraith and his plotline so much that I have to at least give it 4 stars. I cannot, in good conscience, give it 3 stars, given how much I genuinely had fun and enjoyed reading this book, outside of the spice. But the spice and the unsatisfactory ending that was the good conclusion to his character arc that was sacrificed for the sake of spice made me mad enough that I can't give it 5 stars, even though this would be, like I said, if we were just basing it off of how much I enjoyed it, it would be a 10-star book, hands down. Like, it's an amazing story. So with also that in mind, I can't recommend it to people because of the spice level in this. And yeah, I would say, like, you just have to read with caution if you're ever interested in this book. If you want to, stay tuned, because I want to talk about the details. So I'm going to talk about this and compare it with Hunter. If you don't want spoilers for either one, then click to the end and I'll give you guys a timestamp. So if you don't want the spoilers for this book or for Hunter, then stick around to the end, because I have to talk about how gorgeous this book is, and I'll give you guys a look on the inside. So stick around and skip to this time period. I'll put it on the screen if you don't want spoilers for this or for Hunter. So yeah, let's just get into this. So basically you have the concept of Wraith, and the concept of Jared is a being made or created or forged by pure evil for the sake of killing. And they have no memory of who they once were, and they only know killing. Killing is their entire existence and way of life. And then you have some amnesia involved, and you have a twist thrown in with the woman that they love, where they killed somebody that the woman loved. In this case, Wraith kills Harrow's family. And in Hunter, Jared kills Gabriel, Averella's brother. And then the couple figures that out, and it creates obviously a rift because the woman realizes that the man killed her family, and it creates a rift. The men feel guilty and try to do right by that, and that results in the men getting recaptured and re-put into that position of losing their memory, becoming a mindless killer again, and being sent after the woman they love to kill them. And both of the men try fighting back and they fail, and that's where the line comes in at, where it is in Hunter. Oh, I'll tell you that in a minute. So in this one, he shot out of the room, through the walls, and into the night to find his prey. His vow had been given. The seer's fate was sealed. In other words, he's going to go get her. He's going to go kill her as he's been ordered to do, and he has no choice. In mine, I did something, I can't even remember now. The hunter... He was a hunter, and the hunter was going to hunt. Something along those lines. It's worded much better now since I've fixed the editing. But the concept, again, that one line defining the fact that, okay, they have been recaptured. They have been ordered to go after and kill the woman that they love. They have no choice. They are mindless monsters and killers. And the last line emphasizes that they're going to go kill her now. And it's not like, you know what I mean? That concept is what I did in Hunter. So when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like that. This is so similar. The problem with redemption stories is that in Sanctuary of the Shadow, when you have... It irritates me so much because when you have the woman who knows that he killed her family, in this book, at one point she finds out that it wasn't really that he did it against his will, that he had no choice, and then she feels guilty because she abandoned him when she found out that he killed her family. And it's like, no, he killed your family. Like, you can understand where he's coming from, that he didn't have a choice. You can forgive him for that. But it went too far in the sense that it made her feel like she was the bad guy, forever hating him for it. And it's like, no, you were justified in your anger and in abandoning him in that moment because you found out he was a killer. You know, I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like, you know, I still had those redemptive moments between Jared and Averella where she comes to understand that he didn't have a choice, but she never once felt guilty for being angry at him. You know, that when you find out that he killed your family is justified. However, you can still come to the conclusion that it wasn't his fault, and the forgiveness. And then at the end, when he gets his memory back due to all kinds of other stuff happening, he remembers that he almost killed her and that he killed her family, and he's guilty and doesn't feel like he deserves her, and she kind of just gives him a couple like pep talk, and he resists, and they have some dialogue for a couple pages, but eventually he's just like, okay. And then he starts kissing her and the spicy scene happens, and it's just never touched on, and we never go back to his perspective to have us get back into his head on how he works through it in his own mind. And I feel like it's so unsatisfactory because we needed to go back to his perspective to find out, to get in his head and find out how he was coping with this and how he was dealing with this and accepting what he's done and what he's become and the mistakes that he's made and how he learns to forgive himself. And it also wasn't satisfactory that it was just a pep talk from Harrow. You have to work for your redemption, and I feel like he should have worked a little bit harder for it. There should have been something more to his redemption, and it felt too perfect and too just everything just works out instantly, and all of a sudden she's pregnant and they have a kid, and then we jump to the happy ending, and it just like, I have no problem with happy endings, but it's not earned, and it's just too much, too easy, too fast, too quickly, too perfect with a little bow on top without any work for it, and we kind of brush over his whole character arc when there was a lot of build up to it. And when you have that much build up to it, you have to have more in the resolution part of it, if that makes sense. So it was very unsatisfactory, and so that irritated me. And I feel like yeah, and in Hunter there's a lot more work and effort, and Jared is taking a long time to forgive himself. He has not forgiven himself, and in the Valiant series that doesn't just stop at Hunter. He still has that, he's still trying to work through that as you get to the later Valiant books. So you can come back now. So overall, like I said, I wish I could give this I have to give this 4 stars due to the ending being unsatisfactory. And so thank you for waiting to the end. And if you want to put this there, I honestly really love the formatting and the way this book looks, the yellow pages and these. They also have the chapter headings. These little suns are really pretty, and it's a really beautiful book. It's like well formatted. It's also a hardback, so the actual like that's so pretty. And I'm trying to get the dust jacket off. So the actual hardback book too, like, isn't that just beautiful? And like I said, it's got a map in here too, and it's the world building and the race building is just so much fun. So the title page, I mean, it's just such a beautiful book, and that's honestly what originally drew me in, was how beautiful it looks. Like, that map is so amazing. I didn't even use it, honestly. I could have, given where they were traveling, but the writing itself made it clear where they were, so I found myself I didn't really need the map, but I really loved that it was in there, and honestly, I just hit myself in the face at that. The border on the map is actually really gorgeous, so it's just a really beautiful book. Honestly, when I hit myself in the face, that really hurt. And like I said, the back of this is what intrigued me originally. Are you okay? Are you okay? His voice was quiet, as it always was in rare times he used it. Yes, I'm fine. She nearly choked on the words. He was still concerned for her, enough to fight his aversion to speech, even after he thought she'd betrayed him. Suddenly making him understand was her top priority. Somehow, in the short time she'd known him, he'd become one of the most important people in her life. The truth of that scared her, but it was too late to turn back now. She approached his cage. I'm sorry. I had to say whatever I could to get Salazar to leave you alone. I have no intention of training you for any ridiculous circus show, I swear. Wraith's fingers tightened around the bars. I'm not going to force you to show your wings, and I don't care about your other abilities, I promise. Wraith didn't move, didn't even blink, and Harrow's heart sank. He didn't believe her, and why should he? Everyone he'd met had hurt him in some way, so why should he think Harrow was any different? His skin suddenly morphed into a brilliant orange. It was so bright she lifted a hand to shield her eyes from the dazzling onslaught. She noticed the stubborn set to his chin, and it clicked. A bubble of surprised laughter burst out of her. Yes, you can even be that color if that's what you want. It might help to save some lamp oil. It's so bright. He smiled, or at least his eyes did. Like, I wanted to know, I had so many questions. I wanted to know what was going on and how she betrayed him and if he forgave her. And I needed to know more. And then I read the interior, the blurb, oops. And then I read the blurb here, and I had to buy it. I saw that, and then we weren't able to get it that week, but a week later we were finally able to buy it, and then I started it a couple of days after that. So another thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot to talk about was the fact that this is kind of deceptive. Like, I talked about how, or at least I will talk about how gorgeous this cover is, the pages, the interior, like all of that stuff, and the blurb. It makes you think that it's very much like a circus fantasy, where a circus is like a primary aspect to the story. It's there in the beginning, and then they leave, and then you never get to go back or explore more of the circus. So it had very much the wrong kind of vibe, and a lot of the reviews that I was reading mentioned that repeatedly, that the marketing on this was done terribly because it led you in the wrong direction. The cover and all the marketing and all of this is just kind of wrong and doesn't actually fit the story or what it's about. For me, I wasn't mad that it was thrown off, that it was off. I was just a little surprised. But for a lot of people, that's a big turnoff, is that it's not what it seems to be, because you're reading this wanting a circus type fantasy, and the circus is not a big part of it at all. The second thing that I wanted to point out is that the twist with Wraith, I saw it from the first scene that he came in. I knew immediately what the twist was, who he really was. Like, it starts off where he has amnesia, doesn't know who he is or what he's done. And after having the hints of what the whole history is and what the races are and what we're given, and then based on his first scene and how he comes in there and the fact that he is physically described, I knew exactly what he was, and I called the entire twist. So nothing in this book surprised me or anything. I knew exactly what the twist was. So I feel like it was more surprising for Harrow than anybody else. I don't know if the author intended for it to be a twist or just one of those things that, like, we as the audience and the readers knew, but the main character didn't. But it wasn't surprising me at all. And it felt a little obvious, so I feel like the characters should have figured this out, but they were both ignorant, and there was a lot of red flags that Harrow should have picked up on that she didn't, but sometimes that happens. So that was another thing that was kind of like a meh thing, but it didn't really, like, none of those things that I just mentioned really took away like a star point or whatever. For me, the biggest issue was the spice and the unsatisfactory ending. So like I said, overall 4-star review. I really wish I could give it 5 stars, but it just was not resolved in a satisfactory way. I'm really left empty and disappointed, and now I have to go write something with that concept again, even though I already did it with Jared, with Hunter. Yeah, I just was really disappointed by the ending, honestly. It was not satisfactory, and too much spice. I'm sorry. So I can't really recommend this to you guys, but it is creative. So if you want to skip over the spicy scenes, they are skippable, and you can skip them if you need to. So just to let you guys know in case you're interested, but I can't recommend it. So overall, 4-star review. I genuinely really loved this book though, despite its issues. So thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, if you liked my review of this book and how annoying the spice was, then check out my review of A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's another book that I genuinely loved, but spicy scenes kind of ruined some of the moments in that book as well. So check that out. You don't want to miss it.